Hey everyone, so in this Java tutorial I wanted to show you how we can combine a while loop with try-catch to make it so that we have scanner input that checks for various conditions. So first, let's create a while loop, and I'm going to make this while true, because if you remember, just like in the video about break and continue, we want to be able to break out of this loop. So for now, I'm just going to make this loop end in a break, so that way it doesn't give me that error down there. Now, we have our while loop right here. So first, let's create a integer, and we're going to make it equal to, we're going to call it our number, and we're going to make it equal to scanner.next int, just like that. And we're of course using our scanner from up here. And if you remember, this can throw various exceptions. So in order to handle case of exception, we're going to say try, and we're going to wrap this integer inside of a try block. And we're going to go catch. Oh, and we of course need to say what exception it is. I'm just going to say just any exception ignored. And we're going to put this right here, and we're going to say we're going to say with this exception we just want to print out input failed. And then we're going to continue. So we're going to go to the next while loop and try it again. Okay, now let's see what happens here. And I don't need this anymore. That was from a different tutorial. Okay, here we go. So you can see this number's ignored. So if I put in a letter, you could see that we're having an error because our input is basically, every time we're typing in this next int, what's happening is it's basically running into an error because we're basically like the input thing is basically completely stuck. And so this is the reason why I don't particularly like using next int. Instead, I like to do like this. So first, we're going to create a new try block, and we're going to say string, and we'll call it input equals scanner.next line. And we're also going to trim it, just because that would be a useful thing to do, because as you remember, we have to trim our strings and trim that stuff on it if we ever want to really do anything with those strings. And then this next line here can also catch some exceptions, such if our scanner is cloned or if no line was found. So we could handle those exceptions. We could also just not. So I'm actually going to just not leave it. I'm going to leave it like this for now. And then instead of trying to do scanner input equals scanner.next line, we could instead do this exception, or this thing. So Java has a class called integer, and this is like a reference type integer, because you know how int is not a reference type. Sometimes there's some things you need to do in Java that need reference types. And this integer class has lots of very useful things on it. One of them is parse int. We also have toString, value of, bytes, max value, min value, size. These are all things that you could do that just have to do with integers, specifically ints. And you can see every single one of these all up here generally return are all returning ints. I think that's because this function returns an int. So the function we're going to use is integer.parseInt input. And you'll see this only has one exception it can throw, the number format exception. So let's try to account for that exception. And we're going to need to import it. Oh no, we don't need to import it. And now let's try doing this. And you're going to see we're not going to get that same behavior, because if I type in a letter, it's just going to say input failed, and then it's going to try again. Instead of completely breaking our whole scanner, this parse int can't break our scanner, and this is giving us a valid input. If you put in nothing here, it just says input failed. Same thing, but we put in that, and if let's say we put in an actual number, it works, and then it breaks. So we could actually put this break inside of this. I'm mostly doing this to show you how try-catch really works. So whenever you're doing a try-catch, it just keeps running through line by line, and then if a line catches an exception, it'll immediately jump down here. So we're going to type in something, input failed, we type in this, and it breaks out still, because it did this, and then it went to the next line. Now let's try doing something maybe a bit more meaningful with it, and I just generally prefer this type of format, because I like only having one thing inside of my try catches. So because I only like having one thing inside of my try catches, I also would want this int to be outside of here and given a default value of 0. But of course, we could run that exception and that will handle for, so we're never gonna use this value of 0. So we have our int 0, and now we're gonna basically print out, how about that number plus 1. So basically all this is gonna do is this right here obviously is only going to work if our input is a number. Like if it's a word, that's going to put the number 1 at the end of it, but we only want this to work for numbers, specifically integers. So obviously if you have a decimal point number, it won't work. So that input failed, this input failed, but we just type 34 and it prints out 35 and it ends the program. So that is one of the ways you can use try catch to check for input failures. Another thing you could do with Java, let's say we have an input failure with, let's say we did all this stuff right here to figure out that's a number, right? Well, we can create something very similar to this try catch, but let's say we only want our integers to work for numbers with a value over 1,000. Or yeah, let's say 1,000. So our adder is not going to work for anything over 1,000. So if our number is greater than 1,000, we want to continue. And we might actually, let's give the person a useful message as well. So we're going to say, you must input a value less than 1,000. And then we'll go continue. And you'll notice here I put an underscore just for readability. So let's try this. Now if I try 1,001, you must, or that's 10,001, but still, same problem. You must input a value less than 1,000. We try 10, it works just fine. So this is another thing you can do, and this is frequently called if statements like this, where you check for a condition and then you do something like you break out of your scope. This is often called a guard clause. We'll go more into this later. This is an extremely useful technique for simplifying if statements, so you don't need to have as much nesting. So that is how you can basically validate input, and this is an extremely useful technique in Java. So we're going to be using this for this next project that we're going to be going on. Both of these techniques are, definitely recommend you do something like this for the next project. Of course, you can do it pretty much however you want, whatever you need to. So whatever floats your boat, basically. But that's about it, and thank you so much for watching this Java tutorial.